Chapter 1. Amelia's Return. The city greeted her as strangers are greeted, with silence. The air was heavy with moisture, with the old smells of wet asphalt, with tobacco smoke that still seeped from the cracks in abandoned basements. Amelia stood at the station, in no hurry to get off the platform. She didn't have a suitcase in her hands, only a battered backpack that didn't contain a single object of value, only things that made it hard to breathe. The station emptied almost immediately, as if the other passengers knew better than to linger in places where ghosts live. She took a step, and each step rang in her ears, like an echo of time lost, slipping away, disintegrating into dreams and regrets. The foggy light of the lanterns refracted as if passing through water, and the city seemed drowned. The houses stood like silent giants, not new, not beautiful, but stubborn. She recognized the cracks in the walls, like moles on the body of an old friend. She walked along the streets where she once ran barefoot, holding the hand of a boy who promised to wait. But children always promise, with that sincerity that disappears along with baby teeth and naive dreams. Her path led to where it all began. To the house from which she ran away. To the room with peeling wallpaper, the smell of baked goods and old books. To the armchair by the window, in which her grandmother knitted in silence, listening to the noise of the city, as if it were telling her stories. And to the doors behind which Theo remained, a blue gaze, a scar above his eyebrow, and that silence between them that never became a farewell. 7 years passed. 7 years filled with cities in which she never felt at home. 7 years of voices similar to his, but each time not him. 7 years of other people's hands, from which she wanted to run away in the first minutes. She didn't know if he was still here. She didn't know if he was married, happy, remembered. And why was it necessary to remember? But memories are like water. Even if you don't call them, they will still find a crack and leak out. When Amelia reached the old stairs leading to the alley, everything around seemed to hold its breath. Somewhere in the distance, a bicycle bell rang. The windows of the house where a yellow lamp once burned were now dark. She sat on the steps, as in her youth, stretching her legs out in front of her, and closed her eyes. The city was silent. But inside her, footsteps echoed. His steps. Or maybe her own. Chapter 2. Theo's Shadows. In the old city, night always came earlier. Not by the clock, but by the feeling. As soon as the sun hid behind the factory chimneys and brick roofs, everything turned blue. As if someone had spilled ink into the water, and memories floated along the streets, heavy as fog over a river. Amelia wandered aimlessly, letting her feet lead her where her soul had not looked for a long time. She walked past shop windows with dusty mannequins, past an empty store where records had once been sold, past a wall with graffiti that she and Theo had once painted together, she holding a spray can. He hugged her from behind. And they laughed until the police came and broke up the youth riot. Now the wall had been repainted. Only if you looked closely, familiar lines appeared through the layer of gray paint. Like a memory, inexpressible but alive. Everything in the city had changed. But he still lived here. She knew it. She felt it in her skin, in her back, in the tremor that would wake up in her as soon as the street began to resemble his gate. Once, Theo was the embodiment of freedom. Not the rebellion that teenagers demonstrate in torn jeans, but that quiet, stubborn freedom that lives inside, the sky in his eyes, the fire in his voice, and the confidence that the world can be lived differently. He believed in the light, even when everything around was black. He did not swear eternity, he was just there. And that seemed more reliable than any words. But then, 7 years ago, Amelia chose the noisy city and brilliant prospects. She left a letter. Not because she did not love, because she was afraid that she loved too much. It seemed to her that love should be like a path up, to the heights, and not deep down to the roots. And she left, choosing the heights. And failed. Now, in the alley behind the theater, she stopped. Here, under the humming street lamp, he had kissed her for the first time. His palms smelled of tree resin then, because he had just helped his father build a barn. And her lips trembled, because she did not know how to do it, but she knew that it had to be with him. She remembered the taste of that moment better than the taste of the first wine, the first victory, the first failure. And suddenly, a voice. Quiet, uncertain, from behind. Amelia? She did not turn around at once. Her heart was beating too loudly. She was afraid that it was not him. And she was afraid that he. When she turned, she saw Theo was standing under the street lamp, holding a bag of groceries in his hand, as if he was simply walking home. He had grown older. His face had become sharper, his posture stronger. But his eyes had not changed. Still the same as when she left without saying goodbye. The silence between them lasted an eternity. And then he stepped closer. Are you back? She didn't answer. Because everything she wanted to say was stuck somewhere in her throat. Because 7 years of words don't fit into one yes. He exhaled. And suddenly, he grinned. I thought you wouldn't show up again. She looked down. Me too. Their shadows on the wall merged into one. Chapter 3. The House That Waited. They walked in silence. No touching, no clarification. Just close, step by step. Just like they had once, that last night before she left, when she didn't know how to say goodbye. He had been silent then, too, as if he had sensed. And she hadn't dared to turn around. Now, as if time had decided to give them a second chance at that same silence. Theo's house was still there, on the corner by the pavement, with peeling shutters over which ivy stretched. Inside, it smelled of wood, rain, and time tea. He took off his jacket, threw it on a hook, and everything seemed the same. She stood by the door, not taking off her shoes, not moving, as if each step further would cost too much. Come in, he said quietly. She stepped inside. The room seemed frozen in time. The same shabby sofa. The same books on the table, on the windowsill, on the floor. An old record player. A black and white photo of her father in a frame warped with age. Everything was not just familiar, everything was too alive. As if these walls had been waiting for her more than he had. He put the kettle on. The water boiled slowly, as if it sensed that there was no need to rush. She sat down on the edge of the sofa and ran her hand over the rough fabric. Everything around her whispered, you could have stayed. All this time. All this was yours. Theo poured 2 glasses, put one in front of her. I didn't throw away your letters. Amelia looked up. Have you read them? He sat down opposite her, leaning his elbows on the table. Sometimes. When I wanted to remember that I'm wrong too. She shuddered. Do you think I was a mistake? No, he shook his head. I think you were a dream that was afraid of itself. Silence fell between them. Only the kettle roared in the background, like the breath of time. He continued. I didn't wait for you. Really. I lived. Honestly. I worked, built, made mistakes. There was someone nearby. It didn't work out. And now, you're here. As if everything that was between was just a long pause. She clasped her palms. Her chest ached. Not from guilt, from tenderness. So sharp that she wanted to scream. I didn't live either, she whispered. I just breathed. Without you, this is not life. They looked at each other, as if they were learning to see again. And suddenly rain. Heavy. Drumming on the roof, on the windows. The house shook, as if it itself could not withstand this meeting. Amelia stood up and went to the window. The glass reflected 2 people, him from behind, her in the reflection of the street light. Like ghosts of who they were. And she understood, she had not returned to him, but to herself. He came closer. Their shoulders touched. There were no words. No promises. Only rain. Only light. Only 2 people returned from the past to what could have been the present. Chapter 4. Ash and Stone. The wind had become sharp in the evening. It swept through the empty streets like the whispers of those long gone, leaving behind only crumpled traces of memories. Amelia stood on the edge of an old bridge, the same one that in her childhood had seemed to her the boundary between the world of the familiar and the unknown. Now it seemed a symbol of her own fragile boundary, between the past that breathed in her and the present that did not know how to accept her. The wet boards creaked underfoot. They were soaked with fog and covered with a thin layer of rot and ash. Neither fire nor time had destroyed this bridge, but that was precisely why it seemed vulnerable, like something that had held on to its existence for too long, although it should have crumbled. A gray haze hung along the shore, thick as fabric stretched over a face. This had once been their secret dock, where she and Theo would meet, leaving tiny notches in the planks, like notches in memory. Crows slept on these planks now. The notches had smoothed out, and if you looked at them today, there was nothing personal about them. Just wood. Just the marks of time. Amelia picked up a dry branch from the ground and snapped it in half. The crunch flew apart like a bolt of lightning, and for a moment it seemed to her that the whole city had frozen. She watched the branch fall into the water, the current pick it up and carry it toward the dark horizon, where the sunset painted the sky the colors of old letters, red, brown, almost rusty. The house where she had spent her youth was not far away, 2 blocks from the bridge. But she did not go there. That evening she was drawn not toward the light, but toward the stone, the old library, which was going to be torn down. As a child, she had called it the House of Memory because every corner of the room smelled of old stories. It was where she had first read poetry to Theo, silently, from around the corner, watching his reaction. It was where he had once left a note between the pages, which she carried in her pocket for 3 years until the rain washed away the ink. The library was empty now. The windows were boarded up, the entrance locked, but the back door still allowed entry for those who knew where to look for a crack in the stone. It was cold inside, and the smell of old books mixed with the smell of mold and damp. Every step Amelia took made a hum, as if the walls were trying to repeat her steps, like an echo repeating memories. There was a balcony on the 2nd floor. From here, in their youth, they had watched thunderstorms, covered under a blanket, when the whole city thundered, and it seemed as if only the 2 of them were the silence in the catastrophe. Now from the balcony all that could be seen were empty streets and abandoned buildings. Only her breath in the frosty air reminded her that someone was still alive. Amelia pulled the letter from her pocket. It was old, almost crumbling, but she kept it as a reminder that once someone had spoken to her heart as if he understood every beat. It was from Theo. It did not end with a period. It simply ended, like moments that were not destined to become eternity. She set fire to the paper. The flame was dim but determined. It ate away the lines, the dates, even the name. She watched the past disappear without trying to stop it. The ashes settled in her palm, and she slowly scattered them to the wind. The wind carried them away, as did the years, as did the hopes. Amelia went down the stairs and out into the street. The fog began to clear. In the distance, lanterns lit up, dim yellow lights, like the eyes of a city that had finally decided to look into her face. She didn't know where to go. She didn't know what was next. But with each step, her own breathing became more even. And somewhere deep inside, beneath layers of loss and unspoken words, a flame flickered. Not a flame, no, just a warm spark. Enough to remember. And maybe one day to live again.